The kerfuffle down in Florida between the Walt Disney Corporation and Governor Ron DeSantis, well, not just the governor, the entire Florida state government actually, has gotten a little more heated now. In fact, I think it's gone from kerfuffle to full-blown legislative warfare. Who's winning this? Is it the right thing to do? Is it a good Republican approach that Governor DeSantis is taking? Is this really about Disney's woke politics? Let's bring in the man with all the answers. He's been writing about it over at the mighty Red State, part of the Town Hall Salem media family. He's the managing editor, Ed Morrissey. Also my partner in crime on the weekly VIP video that you can get over there at Hot Air called Off the Beaten Path. Oh, look, there I am right there over your shoulder, Ed. Good to have you, Ed. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. I appreciate it, Larry. Those are all great questions, right? And I think what's happened is that this thing keeps morphing into other things, right? This thing starts with Disney getting involved in a dispute over the Parental Rights and Education Act, which was a little over a year ago when this thing started to get floated out, which prevented gender ideology from being taught to kindergartners through fourth graders. I mean, this was a pretty basic sort of, let's limit the type of sex education that's going out to elementary school kids. And Disney got involved in this in a big way and ended up crossing swords with Ron DeSantis and the state legislature, plus a whole lot of angry parents. So it has its genesis there, and this was the legislation that the left has lied about and called "Don't Say Gay," which of course it's not a "Don't Say Gay" bill. But Disney bought into that narrative, right, Ed? And Governor DeSantis said, "Listen, you guys get so many special favors from the taxpayers of Florida and the people who are, helping to underwrite a lot of these privileges that you get over land rights, over electric deals, the self-police, a whole bunch of stuff. It's like, how about you mind your business, we'll mind our business." And Disney wouldn't mind their business, and that's when he said, okay, fine, then all those favors are going to go away. Is that a thumbnail? It's a pretty good thumbnail, right? I mean, this starts back in the 1960s when they create this special tax district called the Reedy Creek District, which allows Disney all sorts of real governmental autonomy in where Walt Disney World is located. And that is a question as to whether or not that's really good policy. It's certainly not conservative policy. I would call it more like corporatist policy.
I mean, it may have made sense when it was literally just swampland and Walt Disney comes in with, plane loads of gold and says, I'm going to do something with it. But decades later, I think it's reasonable to say, is this still working for us? Because clearly Disney doesn't need the brakes anymore.
Right. No, and I think I think it's a fair question. And I think if it had been divorced from the issue with the Parental Rights and Education Act, it probably would have been still a contentious issue, but at least you would have been able to focus on that being the issue. Obviously, this starts off, though, with a political war over the act. But what has happened since then is that the legislature has come in, they have reorganized that tax district, and they have replaced all of the previous commissioners on it. But prior to those people being replaced, Disney snuck in a covenant which granted all of the authority of the board back to Disney, basically in perpetuity, as long as King Charles II's descendants still sit on the throne of England, is plus 30 years, right? Which is how this covenant was written, which is so stupidly provocative that really there was no choice but the Florida legislature to step back into this and say, all right, you didn't want to comply with that. This is what we're going to do now. We're basically going to demolish the whole thing, and we're going to make you just another corporate citizen in the state of Florida. And all that state land that we've left alone around your park, we're going to think of other uses for it. And, DeSantis suggested yesterday that it was going to be one of the uses might be a state prison, which is never going to happen. You're not going to put a state prison next to an amusement park for kids.
Right. Well, although if you've ever stood in line for some of the Fantasyland rides with your toddlers, it feels like you're doing time. I'm not going to lie.
It does. It does. Only they make you pay to do time. I mean, it's expensive to go to Walt Disney World. It really is. So, I mean, the way that they had it set up, the way Disney got this thing set up with the covenant was basically they were going to be able to set their own tax rates. They still had, control over code enforcement and that sort of thing. And clearly that's not going to pass muster with the Florida legislature.
Right.
And I think in the presser yesterday, DeSantis was very careful not to get into the culture war stuff. He made this really about who is sovereign in Florida. Is it a corporation or is it the people?
Yeah.
The state rep, one of the state reps that was out there though, sort of shifted it over to the woke.
I saw
issues.
that. Yeah, she played right. And by the way, I mean, the governor, that may have been part of the plan. Listen, I'll stay out of that stuff.
Of course.
You want to do it, that's fine. I mean, this is a question of sovereignty. It is a question. The people of Florida should be able to reassess this relationship 50 years later, considering the gajillions of dollars Disney's been able to make off of this. And it's not like Disney's going to pick up and move, right? I mean, this is a smart negotiating position. But let me just play devil's advocate for a second, because I don't disagree with you. You know, divorcing the woke politics agenda as sort of the rationale behind this probably is the wiser, more circumspect way to approach this. But, you know, a lot of conservatives looking at what's going on in our country, it's like, you know, why shouldn't we? Why shouldn't we stand up when we've got the levers of power? Why shouldn't we stand up for what we believe in and what our voters believe in? Because God knows the left does that. The left uses power when they're in power to punish or reward the people who are pushing these agendas in the culture or in our schools. What's wrong with a conservative doing the same? That's the game we're in right now.
Well, I think it's, and I don't, I sympathize with the argument. I think it contradicts our agenda more than that type of thing contradicts the left's agenda, right? Our agenda is personal liberty, limited government, right? Limited government is supposed to be one of our guiding lights. And this really isn't limited government. But then again, neither was the corporatist structure of the Reedy Creek District. I mean, that wasn't limited governance either. That was just deputizing a corporation to govern itself at the expense of whoever else lived in that area. I mean, that's not limited government either. So I think DeSantis was smart to frame this the way he did. The state rep, whose name is Carolina Amnesty, which I think is just maybe one of the most wonderful names in politics. Carolina Amnesty. I had to look it up 3 times just to make sure I hadn't gotten that wrong. That wrong. You know, she can, and you're right. It may have been a decision that we're going to tag team this a little bit, and she's going to handle the woke aspects of this and go after Disney for that. But I think DeSantis had the smarter approach by saying, look, this is just a bad arrangement, and Disney was being deliberately provocative in trying to push through this illegal and void contract. And since Disney is going to act in that manner, the state legislature is going to treat this district a lot differently than it has in the past.
It is kind of interesting, though, that this sort of has reversed the roles in terms of the regular left-right divide here, because for Democrats or people on the left who defend Disney or go after DeSantis on this and attack them, they have to basically endorse huge government tax breaks and incentives and corporate welfare for one of the biggest corporations out there. So it is kind of an interesting jujitsu from the governor here.
Well, I think that there's a lot of jujitsu going on both sides of this equation, quite frankly. This is, and again, I think that's part of the problem with politics. Maybe we'll get into that some other time, but is
maybe
that
later today on our Off the Beaten Path at hotair.com.
We should talk about outcome-based politics rather than principle-based politics. I think that's a great conversation. We should have that today.
I think it's one we are having for the last decade, I think, in this country. Real fast, you know there's some unwritten laws in the media, Ed, and one of them is you can't have a conversation like this without talking about Donald Trump. So, Donald Trump has taken to Truth Social. He says DeSantis is being destroyed by Disney. His PR plan fizzled. Now he's going to back to New in order to save face. Disney's next move will be to announce that there's no more money invested in Florida, and maybe they'll even pull out of certain properties. That seems, I don't know about that take. What do you think, Ed?
I find it interesting that in the past week, the Trumps have come out defending Disney, Budweiser, and Gavin Newsom. I'm not sure what's going on at Team Trump, but this is completely incoherent. And I mean, this is just another example of the incoherence that the Trump team is engaging in order to sort of do this gainsay of anything Ron DeSantis or really anybody else in the field is doing. It's complete reaction. It's Biden-esque. It's total reaction, no strategy.
Yeah, and you're right. And it seems like it's just, well, because DeSantis is doing this, Donald Trump now has to be on the side of Disney, and I don't think that's the political viable place. But what do I know? What do you know? Well, Ed knows more than I do, that's for sure. Thank you, Ed Morrissey. We'll see you later on Off the Beaten Path at redstate.com. More to come on O'Connor Tonight.